if you're a brand that has a lot to say, you've got to do really savvy marketing. Otherwise, you're making all these unbelievable on-farm investments and you're differentiating yourself and you're super proud of how you farm, but you have to be a savvy marketer. So there are more opportunities for more food types and products. I mean, just look at your grocery store aisle. I mean, how many nut butters do you see on there? The financial hardships that farmers see on a day-to-day, year-to-year basis are real. And that's where, but the thing is, like, all sorts of businesses struggled. So in my mind, like I always say, the worst thing we can do for the industry is market our lifestyle. Like no more commercials with like farmers waking up at dawn with their dog getting in the truck. Like those are done. What we need to be talking about is like how hard it is to grow great food, the expenses, and why consumers should value the food product.
Welcome to Farm to Fork, the Innovators. I'm David Maloney, president of Datum FS. With over 40 years in the food supply chain, we explore the stories and strategies transforming how we produce and serve food. Our guest innovator today is Ali Cox, a fifth-generation farmer and the founder of Noble West, a trailblazer in food marketing. We dive into the current state of the farming industry, exploring the rise in operational costs, shifts in agricultural practices like upcycling and regenerative farming. We also discuss strategies to decommoditize food offerings, and we take a look at what the future holds for the consumer food experience. So buckle up, hit that subscribe button, and let's harvest progress together. This is Farm to Fork, the Innovators, where the future of the food supply chain starts with this episode. All right, Ali, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm Ali Cox, the CEO and founder of Noble West, a food ingredient and agriculture marketing agency. We are based in Central California, where I like to say where most of the specialty food is grown, although you're in Florida, so we could probably debate that, David. But I'm a fifth generation farmer on both sides and really am very, very passionate about the food system and the ecosystem, as messy as it is and as really controversial and complicated as it is. So we work with clients that are typically hero food ingredient first. So they are we're really talking about like whatever the hero is. In our case, it's typically agriculture. It's the primary food ingredient in any food product, and really how the food is grown and where it's grown and by whom and under what sort of ethos and type and style is really where Noble West shines. And we help our clients tell that story and hopefully get the ROI they're looking to get, and participate in the food ecosystem in their most authentic way.
Okay, cool. And so can you define hero for us?
Sure. So think of a charcuterie board, right? Mm-hmm. The heroes of the charcuterie board are your whole grape, your cheese, your meats, basically your dried fruit. Those are the heroes of the board. And so it's not necessarily a produced product. They're not actually even ingredients. They're the heroes. So our best work and the work we love the most oftentimes is working with food commodity types that are an almond or a rice or whatnot, and helping that hero food ingredient be, utilized as an ingredient in different forms and uses and byproducts. And that's where that sustainability story and the farming practices and whatever kind of the ethos is of the farmer and also that food brand and processor or mill is just so critical. And that, I think, is where Noble West, we get to the truth and the heart of things real fast through some of our like more bespoke branding processes. And also, of course, like utilizing our background now with 17 years of food marketing and agriculture marketing to really sort of inform those stories.
So is it fair to say you're very well connected with a lot of the innovators in this space, in the food supply chain space?
Yeah, I mean, the innovators, of course, like the food labs and some of like the more like tech-driven people for sure. I would also argue we're the most connected with the backbone of the industry, which is the farmers. So,
Yeah.
I mean, farmers feel we are a safe space for farmers. I talk to farmers every day. Most of our clients, in some way, shape, or form, either are a farmer, they're a grower, packer, shipper, they're investing in farming, they are investing in software and technology and equipment to better service the farming industry. So, at some point, it always sort of weaves back to that baseline of kind of the source of the food.
Yeah, and I would offer, at least my experience with farmers is that they're always innovating. Is that fair?
In some ways, I would
Yep.
say, really speaking for California, they have to. It's mandated.
Yeah.
But I would also argue they're always troubleshooting. Troubleshooting
Okay,
is
better word.
like, I think, the equivalent of farming, right? Like dealing with the weather or different disease or whatever, like was blown over from the neighbor's crop. Like that is just something that I think, and farmers get such a bad rap of being like, sort of slow to change and slow to adopt and like kind of stuck in their ways. And I always argue like, my goodness, you are talking about the most resilient of all
Yeah.
resilient folks.
Yeah.
And what they're going to do is they're going to protect the land. They're going to protect their largest and most oftentimes only asset. And that's of value. And so it's an interesting, wonderful, stubborn type of breed. And that's where I come from.
Okay. And so, fifth generation farmer, it didn't chase you away. All right. So
Well,
it pulled you back in.
after 11 years of living and working in New York City, working in sports and entertainment and fashion and television, I just knew that it was time to move back home, frankly, to focus on an industry that I loved and I was very familiar with, and just see, so much confusion between how consumers perceive food and their food, where their foods come from, and how it's grown. And it just really was kind of eye-opening, of course, living in New York City for that long, where food is just so revered and it's the culture and it's restaurant culture. But that just is such a disconnect from the food source in my mind. And that was also kind of at the start of farm to fork, whatever, kind of in quotation marks. And so it just sort of drew me back. But what's been the most interesting and frankly fulfilling part of the last 11 years, where I just really dove deep into food and agriculture, is just the variety of opportunity to tell different farming stories. So not just, the 5 or 6 crops that are grown on our family farm, but really like, our work now is, I always say, like, I think we're actually more of a sustainability shop now than we are an ag marketing shop, because this is where the future is. This is where, like, finding that messy middle between what growers value the most, which is yield, it's how they get paid, versus what consumers value the most, which is quality food. There's such a disconnect and misalignment in every part of the process. So that to me is where we're really just focused on helping consumers gain access to information that they want about their food sources, and helping farming companies and food companies actually tell their authentic story, which in many cases most are doing the right thing, especially if you're here in California. Like our legislative climate and how food is audited and manufactured, and like the levels that we hold the farmers and also food companies to, is so high that there is an inherent sustainability story. And then of course, then I have to get into supporting domestic food and everything else. So that it's just been an amazing journey, frankly.
Okay, great. And so before you came back, we just were speaking offline. You were a rower. Can you tell us how you got into rowing and kind of maybe how that kind of led you where you are? Does that play any part of where you're at today?
I always say, like, all roads lead back to rowing, frankly. For me, it's such an important part of my life. I started rowing in college at the University of San Diego, and then just happened to have a physical, emotional, spiritual, mental, like, extraordinary ability for it. And I made the U.S. national team. I made 7 national teams. And I also made the Olympic team in 2004 and won a medal. I won a silver medal in the women's 8. So
Congratulations.
thank you. So rowing is, I mean, this could be a whole nother podcast, David, comparing the analogy between rowing and life and rowing and work and why is rowing on every teamwork poster that's ever printed? It's because you have to be doing it together in unison to go anywhere. So, I think and a lot of those qualities that like really served me well in rowing served me well working on the farm too. And working in, a family business of being hard, being disciplined, showing up, putting your best foot forward, showing up on good days and bad days, understanding that like when the sun shines, you got to make hay. Same with a race. Like when it's race day, you got to show up and turn it up a notch. And I feel like that's been a real similarity between me and business. There's always got to be another gear and across the board.
Cool. So you mentioned your farm before we jump in. And so folks, I want to really speak to Ali about what she's seeing from the farm level and kind of the stories. I mean, on prior podcasts, particularly as of late, we've been talking a lot about food losing its provenance and consumers not being able to connect with the food, the mechanisms, or the source of their food, which at least I believe is a big problem in the industry because it discourages innovation. It commoditizes everything. So, but on your farm, on your family farm, you mentioned you have 5 crops that you grow?
Plus or minus different, because we do, a portion of our farm is row crop.
Okay. So can you give us an idea of what you're growing on the farm?
Sure. We're growing almonds and walnuts. We work with cherry. My husband and I have a farm management business also. So there's cherries. We grow apricots, beans, tomatoes right now. There's typically always alfalfa or hay. We do have beef cattle. I think those are the big ones right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, great. Thanks. And so we'll maybe step into that. So as you felt pulled back into the food supply chain, right, particularly at the farm level, and would you say, what's changed since you were out, since you left and came back, and what are the major challenges that you see today from a farmer perspective?
Okay. Well, I think the biggest change that has happened since I left in 1997 is minimum wage. So minimum wage at the time, I think when I left, we need to look it up, but in California, it was probably like $11. Mm-hmm. Now if you have more than 25 employees, it's like $25, $24. So, that's one of them. Like how decisions are made is really based on how much it's going to cost. And not that business hasn't always been run by that for, decades and centuries, but truly just the financial impact. And I'm not saying that, this isn't really even an ethical conversation about like, well, they just, fair living wage and all that. I understand all that. I think right now I'm just like, merely talking about like dollars and cents, the dollars and cents that it takes to run and operate. Even just 4 years ago, our operating expenses are 40% more than they were 4 years ago. Mm-hmm. And in our area, almonds are the primary crop, and we grow thousands of acres of almonds here. And the bottom fell out of the price.
Yeah.
So it was $4 a pound for about $3 to $4 a pound for a couple years, going in the late teens, and then it dropped to $1 and change. Like that's where if you don't own your own land and say you had a rent or whatnot, you're losing the farm. You're pulling trees out. You're selling it. It's a fire sale. And that's what happened. So there's just the financial hardships that farmers see on a day-to-day, year-to-year basis are real. And that's where, it's tough. but the thing is, like, all sorts of businesses struggled. So in my mind, like I always say, the worst thing we can do for the industry is market our lifestyle. Like no more commercials with like farmers waking up at dawn with their dog getting in the truck. Like those are done. What we need to be talking about is like how hard it is to grow great food, the expenses, and why consumers should value the food product, not the farming lifestyle. Because that's where I think we have shot ourselves in the foot over and over again. Like there are people that work hard all over this country who have lost their businesses. It doesn't mean they're not working hard. There's lots of people. And so that's where I just don't think farming and agriculture is different. And so I would just sort of argue the biggest change has really been just like the financial acumen it takes. There's just really there's no buffer.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also the regulatory. I mean, baby boomers right now, they can't wait to stop farming and spend more time at the golf course, frankly, if they can, because just the regulatory pressures and the changes that have come over the last 30 years are so exhausting. If you're a 7-year-old farmer, you're over it, let me tell you, because like it is just like hands in the air. What more now? And I think that's where it's succession planning in farming and farming families is the hardest thing. And that's where every single family farm right now